Data, data, data. If you have a high-ticket offer such as agency service, coaching program, or even enterprise software, data is what's going to drive the company forward, right? Especially when you have a sales team in place, bunch of closers. You got to know exactly how they're performing so you can optimize every single variable inside your business to scale and to grow the company, right? So in today's video, I'm going to show you every single thing you should track about your closers to grow. My name is Max, and we build out custom tracking systems for offers like I mentioned before. So essentially we come in, we look at the whole sales process, everything you use, and connect tools you use together and build out a custom dashboard to help you make decisions on the spot without even thinking about it. So let's get straight into it. So I mentioned this in the last video of appointment setter tracking, but data just gives you the clarity, right? Every action has equal or opposite reaction. It's your job to identify why that action is happening, right? So you can optimize every single variable, like I mentioned before. Usually the number of metrics you should track vastly varies on how big is your sales team and what do you need to track, right? But most of the time, the four main apply, which is show rate, close rate, offer rate, and how many calls you book. However, if you scale the sales team, if you grow the sales team, there are a bunch of other metrics you should keep track of to essentially identify what are the gaps in a company. So as I was talking about, there's like a hierarchy of sales metrics, right? So at the top, you have show rate, offer rate, and close rate. However, those metrics are influenced by a bunch of other metrics, right? And it's like a whole tree. So when you track these other metrics, the blue ones, you are able to explain exactly, why close rate is decreasing, why show rate decreasing, etc. Like the setter tracking video, it's going to be in two parts. So the first part is every single metric your closers should track about their performance, as well as end of the day report, and then you as a business owner, what you should know about your closers. So obviously starting off with scheduled calls, you got to know exactly what's the capacity of every single closer. If they're booked out 4 days ahead, then it might be a good idea to hire a new one. So then we obviously have number of live calls. This is how many people showed up on the sales call. That ties in with show rate, obviously. And just bear in mind, when you have setters and you track their show rate, it's also very crucial to track closers' show rate because they need to be held to the same standard, right? If nobody shows up, business won't make money. Simple as that. So how do you calculate this? It's live calls divided by scheduled calls. That gives you show rate. Usually, obviously the higher the better, but the average, like the bare minimum, is 70% show up rate. Then we have number of offers, which is how many people were offered the service on the sales call. That ties again with offer rate, and setters have two different metrics, right? So offering the call and offering the offer on the sales call. However, closers are just being tracked for how many times they pitched the offer you guys sell on the sales call. And not every single person is a good fit, so your closers should choose who to pitch to, right? How do we calculate this? Offers divided by live calls. That gives you offer rate. Then we have prospect quality score, which is just grading and scoring each prospect to just differentiate, what type of avatars are coming through the funnel, showing up on the call, scheduling the calls, closing, right? So there are actually two ways to do this. The first one is, using the application. So before someone calls, they fill out an application. This is much more objective. However, you got to make sure that you use close-ended questions as much as possible, right? So for example, how much do you make? You give them a range 1 to 3K, 3 to 5K, etc., etc. And based off the answers, you can give objective scoring. And the other way is for the closers to decide, right? Again, this is much more subjective, but to make it objective as much as possible, you give them score from 1 to 4. 1 being financially unqualified, no desire to change. 2, reason to change, might not be the best fit. 3, financially qualified, some or no reason to change. And 4, obviously financially qualified, ready to make a change. It really depends on what criteria do you guys prefer, but it's usually how we grade prospects. Then we have call disposition, which is essentially just tracking the result of the call. Again, this is very dependent on the offer you guys run, whether that's B2B, then it might not be a good idea to use this, but if it's like B2C, one call close, tracking what was the disposition would help you in the long run to identify, first off, obviously looking at the prospect scores, right? So what avatars and kind of what disposition ties to a specific avatar, as well as just identifying the gaps in the closers game, right? So for B2C offers, like I mentioned, money objection. So prospect did not close because of financials. It's too expensive. I don't have that money. Then we have uncertainty. They weren't certain, right, about your proposition. Then we have bad timing, right? It's not a good time. Partner objection. I need to talk to my wife, for example. And we have deposit, right? Self-explanatory. And one, which is obviously a closed deal. For B2B offers, budget, which is probably like the same thing. Then authority, are they the decision maker? Then need, do they actually need what you sell? Timeline, again, this is kind of like a bad timing with B2B offers. Sometimes, well, most of the time the sales cycle is much longer than with B2C offers like coaching programs. Then we have deposit, and then we have won. However, what I've seen with B2B offers and kind of like longer sales cycle, just looking at closed or not closed will be enough. Then we have number of deposit, number of closes, cash collected, as well as revenue. Cash collected, revenue, totally two different things, right? So let's say you said something for $5,000 and on the call the prospect gives you only $2,000. $2,000 is cash collected and $5,000 is revenue. Then we have offer to commitment, which is how many people said yes, right, to your pitch. So this could be classified as a deposit or a close. This just tells you exactly, when you pitch, what is the probability of someone saying yes, right? So how do we calculate this? Closes plus deposits divided by offers. That gives you offer commitment. Then we have offer to close, which is almost identical to offer commitment, but we just track closes, right? So this just shows you how many people that have been offered have closed. Your closer's job is to always offer to the right people. So they have to make sure, they're the right fit, financially qualified, etc., etc. And they should be always higher than close rate, which I'm going to talk about later. So how do we calculate this? Simple. Closes divided by offers. That gives you offer close. And then we have call to commitment, which is same thing as offer commitment. However, we just track live calls, right? So if someone hops on a call, what is the probability of them committing to your offer? Closes plus deposits divided by live calls. That gives you call commitment. So then we have call to close, which is close rate, right? This is probably the most important metric after show rate. So how many people that have attended the call closed? And it highly depends on your offer, but around 25% close rate is the average. Now I know a lot of offers can differentiate or calculate the close rate differently, right? So either closes divided by all calls or closes divided by live calls. What I would do is just look at the live calls. So if someone attends, what is the ability or what is the probability of you closing them? And this is, why we listed out the other metrics before. When you see the close rate decrease or increase, you can see exactly what's happening with other metrics that I just mentioned. So how do we calculate close rate? In this case, I would say it's the best to calculate it as closes divided by live calls. Then we have product type. If you offer more than one product, it's always useful to keep track of how much each product makes. I'm a big believer that every single sales rep should know exactly what's happening with their stats, right? So they can identify what are the gaps. So this is just like an example of what we built for Client Ascension, where they compare closers' performance. But something like this should every single sales rep have to really say, okay, well, my show rate is down. Why is that? And then look at the other data to identify what's actually going on. Then we have closer end of the day report. I cannot stress this enough. This is extremely important to keep track of. Just knowing the numbers and staying on top of your game, especially when it comes to the sales team, will help you in the long run to identify and understand how they're performing so you can be efficient. So here's just like a couple of things to keep track of on the end of the day report. This document is going to be in the description so you can go through one by one, but just an example what I would put in there. So we have obviously name, date, right, and then performance information about the closer. Then we have the numbers, right? So looking at cash collected, revenue, week to date, month to date, etc. Then we have call breakdowns, which each and every one of your closers should know exactly what happened on the call, explain it, and then kind of go from there, right? And then we have performance. This is not necessary, but I think it's very useful to just see, if the sales rep is on the right track with their routine, with their food they're eating, fitness, and any other things that are happening in their day-to-day life to help you identify, if they're in the slump and they're not closing deals, like what is the reason? Maybe for example they're not sleeping enough. So I think it's a good useful section to have in your end of the day report. Now we're in the part 2, which is all metrics you need to know about your closers. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we have call capacity per closer. Essentially, how many calls does each closer have on their calendar? As I mentioned before, like you don't want to hire anyone if the capacity is still there. So most people work on commissions, and if they have no prospects to talk to, they'll leave in few weeks, and it just, wastes time, resources, and bandwidth. So from my experience, if your closer's calendar is booked out 4 days ahead, I would say it's a good time to look for a new closer, right? Because when you booked out more than 4 days, the show rate overall is going to drop massively. So you just got to calculate if it even makes sense to give the prospect the option to book more than 4 days ahead. Also, if the calendar is always full, you're just essentially losing money because the prospect cannot book a call, right? So just bear that in mind. Then we have lead to close time, right, which is lead sales cycle. What we do here is we track a number of days since generating and then closing the lead. So if prospect opted in on Monday and closed on Tuesday, the lead to close would equal 1 day. Always track this, whether, that's through an automation or an end of the day report. Then we have call to close, right, which is call sales cycle. As is almost the same. However, if someone opts in today, they will book a call tomorrow. And then, from tomorrow, how long does it take to close? Tracking this metric is actually very crucial because it can give you more insights on using your cash flow and kind of like marketing budget, right? So if you know that someone, on average it takes 7 days to close, then you can divide your resources accordingly to what you want to do. Again, you could track this through an automation or just end of the day report. Then we have follow-up, which you've probably heard the phrase, money is in the follow-up. So I think it's a good practice to know how many times a salesperson on average, has to follow up to close the deal. This just gives you more control over your closers activity. So if your closers don't follow up, you can quite easily identify how much money you are losing. The following metric we have is cash per offer. This is how much cash you collect every single time you offer what you sell to the prospect, right? So cash collected divided by number of offers. Then we have cash per call, which is how much cash you collect every single time someone attends a call. You should always look for ways to increase this. One of the examples is just investing more effort, time, money into marketing and content to gain trust with your prospects, right? So it's gonna become much more easier for your closers to close them and seal the deal if they already trust them beforehand. So how do you calculate this? Is cash collected divided by live costs. Then we have the completely same thing, but just for revenue. So revenue per offer and revenue per call. So I already talked about this, but then we have product type. This is a frequency. So if you sell more than one product, it's just good practice to know how many of those products you sell. Then we have payment type frequency, which is, if you sell high ticket, then most likely, majority of the time, no one has like 9,800 off the rip to give you. So you'll either do like paid in full, 2-3 payments, monthly subscription, etc. So this metric overall shows you what people go for most frequently, right? You can differentiate if most close prospects have money or not. This data just gives you, for example, tweaking the marketing to target just only high level prospects, right? So just more data gives you more insight in what to do next. The second way of, taking advantage of this is just identifying closer performance, right? So if you have John who's closing just paid in full and you have Peter who goes for a payment plan, like it gives you good insight into what is the problem. Like why is John closing PIFs and why is Peter closing just payment plans if they have the same leads. Then we have most common objections, and you can extract this from end of the day report. And I'm telling you, this area alone will help you so much to identify, constraints within your business and your offer. If you know that most common objections are X, then you can tell your closers to practice and literally master these types of objections. Or you can put more effort into your marketing and pre-handle those objections before they even book a call. So just a quick recap, what are the most important metrics, right? So scheduled calls, live calls, offers, deposit, closes, show rate, offer to close, call to close, dispositions, lead quality. By just knowing all of these metrics, is going to be much easier to identify when is the right time to scale and actually why. And the last part is just, taking advantage of the data. So hopefully this document gave you a better idea of what to track, right? But don't be overwhelmed. The only reason we track so many metrics is to identify the constraints and bottlenecks in your sales process. So like I mentioned at the beginning, identifying the hierarchy of the sales metrics, right? So show rate, offer rate, close rate, and then a bunch of metrics below it. Just follow this framework and you'll know exactly what to do next. Also, you should always wait before you make decisions. Not all metrics are equal. What does that mean? Let's say your show rate sucks and it's below 60%, right? The first step is identify why. Second step is to optimize. And third step is to wait. Mainly because we don't jump to 85% show rate immediately the next day, right? You have to wait, gather more data, and then optimize, right? So identify, optimize, wait. Identify, optimize, wait. And when it comes to aligning marketing and sales, this is a big problem with every single company almost. So just knowing the metrics and looking at the marketing side, sales side will just help you identify so many gaps. I've mentioned lead source tracking in my previous video of appointment header tracking guide, so make sure to check that out. And lastly, every single sales rep is different. So first off, if you're able to identify your gaps in your sales game, you have to practice, right? But practice those things that you need to improve on. Otherwise, it's just waste of time. And secondly, you as a business owner, sales manager, or just a leader in general, you need to treat your salespeople completely differently. They have different hobbies, different personalities, different priorities. And you need to know who you work with. There are many studies that sales reps do not get a one-to-one coaching or even like a personalized approach, and that's why they struggle. So just by looking at the end of the day report, the personal performance section, it can just give you so much insight to help your sales reps thrive. This is everything from me, guys. Thank you for watching. Hopefully I was able to provide some insights into what I actually track. If you are looking to build a very robust custom tracking systems like you see on the screen, make sure to book a call down below. Other than that, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.